Asalaamu calaykum waraxmatullaahi wabarakaatu. Meel kasta oo naga daawanaysaan kuna soo dhawaada barnaamij gaar ah oo aanu ku wareysan doono maayarka magaalada Bristol. Mudane Marvin Rees ku soo dhawow SAP TV.
Yeah, thank you. Fantastic to be here.
Waxa tahay maayarkii ugu horeeyay dadka laga tirada badan yahay ee degan dalkan Ingiriiska haday tahay Muslimka, Madowga iyo dadka Shiyanka ah ee degan magaaladan maayarkii ugu horeeyay ee ka soo jeeda dadkaasi ee ay yeeshaan. maxay adiga shakhsiyan kaaga dhigan tahay maxaad se isleedahay waad ku soo kordhisay magaalada?
So I think one of the most important things to me is to be a bit of a role model, and I don't want to overclaim as to what I represent, but where we're sitting, I grew up around here, and for children who come from where I am from to look at me and realise that actually it's within touching distance. The venture playground next to us I used to play in. Eastern Road Primary School, I used to go there and I visited there and told the children that that was my primary school, and they didn't actually believe me. But we found a really old photograph of me in the school football team back when I had an afro. And it was amazing. All the children gasped, like, yeah, you were really here. So that's really important. But beyond that, it's the opportunity to get things done for people. I think one of the high points of being a mayor for me over the last few years is being on people's doorsteps of brand new houses that they've had. A family, 2 children under the age of 3 moved from a tower block in Barton Hill to new houses in St Anne's. Everything in that family's lives has just gone in the right direction. Their prospects, their mental health, the cohesion of their relationship. So the opportunity to do those very practical things for people are just a real honour. I was elected the same day as Sadiq. So Sadiq was Europe's first Muslim mayor. I was the first mayor of African heritage of any major European city. Interestingly, when I was in the United States at the Congressional Black Caucus, and I was introduced to a room of about 175, 200 African-American mayors as the first black mayor in Europe, they couldn't believe it. They were absolutely shocked. And it is quite shocking, but it is, again, it's a real honor to have broken ground like that. And I think it's the additional pressure, the additional responsibility is to be competent and to be good at what you do. What we cannot afford is for when people of African heritage come into positions of leadership for it to go wrong, because everyone then carries the burden for that. So I've had to be as competent as possible. I've had to be, upstanding and get real good things done, both for the sake of our own communities and their confidence, but to demystify and certainly allay any fears there could be, about what black leadership means.
xanuunkan safmareenka ee la yiraahdo COVID-19 adduunka dhan dabcan saameyn laxaad leh uu ku yeeshay magaalada Bristol sidee bay ula tacaashay xanuunkaasi iyadoo gaar ahaan waliba la sheego inuu si aad saameyn ugu yeeshay dadka laga tirada badan yahay ee degan dalka.
So first off, I think Bristol has done incredibly well around COVID. We acknowledged and recognised from the beginning and made the case that the threat to us was the virus, but it was also the consequences of the action we take to manage the virus, which mean greater social isolation, people losing their jobs, losing income, children for whom home is not the safest place, children not being able to go to school. We already have inequality in the education system, and we know that certain children would fall further behind. So from the very beginning, we were saying, how do we deal with the virus? But how do we begin to put in place those support networks to make sure that children are being fed, the extra financial burden that's falling on families, they're being supported through that with a feeding program. And I would say on the whole, we've come through. Our Director of Public Health spoke of a structure that we've set up in Bristol called the One City Approach in the city office, whereby we bring the whole city together to take challenges on. And she said, as a Director of Public Health, if we didn't have that structure, we'd have had to invent it. But what that structure has allowed us to do is get a really lined up, joined up city response to the challenges of COVID. As for what's happened to BME communities, yeah, the burden has fallen disproportionately on BME community shoulders and those shoulders of low-income people in general. We know it's those people working in frontline jobs that have been more exposed. We also know that they're least able to not go to work if they get a positive case again, so they have to work through risk. People in overcrowded housing, again, that falls disproportionately on our community shoulders, and those with pre-existing health conditions. And again, we already had health inequalities in the city. So all those things played themselves out. So COVID has exposed those existing inequalities. The challenge we do now have to take on is that COVID has unleashed a whole collection of forces that could compound those inequalities. So we know that those most marginal to the economy are going to be hit first and hit hardest by the economic consequences of COVID. And then the perversity is they're going to be least well placed to benefit from the economy when it begins to move again. So we have to be incredibly intentional about tackling those entrenched inequalities.
maadaama aad soo hadal qaaday dhanka sinaan wuxuu qaybsiga bulsho meel wada degan quality-ga dhanka caafimaadka waxbarashada ma isleedahay waxba iska bedelay dhanka oo dadka laga tirada badan yahay deegaan kale wax badan oo ay xaq u leeyihiin ayay heleen si siman dadka cadaanka ah ee wadanka degan maxay isbedelay baad isleedahay dhanka equality-ga ama si siman wuxuu qaybsiga dalka gaar ahaan Bristol baan ka hadlaya.
I think it has, but one of the pains of being a mayor is that it sometimes feel like you're straining gnats and swallowing camels, as the proverb says. I visited families that have got new homes. Right? We know children have been fed because we've had a feeding program. We've tackled period poverty, which is one of those poverties that goes unseen when women and children cannot afford sanitary projects. We've had a citywide scheme on that. We've had over 12,000 young people get access to work experience in Bristol. And we know the kind of young people that do not get access to work experience. They're from those whose families don't work in the finance companies, the law firms and the TV production companies. So we've begun to redress those inequalities. And as a city, our one city plan that we've written with the city makes economic inclusion, tackling inequality, and I'd say actually the global sustainable development goals central to what we're about. So I think there's been a chapter change in the way we perceive inequality. We recognise it at last. Bristol used to actually almost deny inequality because it saw it as, well, let's just tell the good story. No, we've got to be honest about what we're facing up to. So we have. The challenge is that, this is like a huge, it's a huge systemic issue. So we are one of the most socially immobile countries in the OECD. The circumstances of your birth are the biggest predictor of where you're going to end up in life. And while we can take measures, that bigger global machine that churns out inequality is a challenge that it's going to take more than me working alone to do something. We have that global approach to it. So in short, yes, we have, but there's a lot of pain inside me because there is such a long way to go.
And haddii aanu ka hadalno dhanka ganacsiga ma isleedahay dadka laga tirada badan yahay albaabada ayaa u furteen ama se waxay heleen fursado ka badan markii hore maadaama uu joogo mayor u eegi.
Well, I think the doors have opened. I mean, look where we are now with Muna. Yeah. Muna is a care company. They now have a contract in the city providing care. I think she has over 90 employees, employed from this community down here in Lawrence Hill and Easton. That is real. That's business. It's not handouts. It's here's a contract, and so that has been happening. And that's one of the reasons we love that approach is because it's about dignity and about real power. Right? No one's dependent on local government decisions. It's about doing the business, and we're looking at supporting that more. We've been doing a lot of work on with our high streets again because they're coming under an awful lot of pressure. So even the work on Stapleton Road, for example, of just with Mohammed Al Sharif and our community development team and other members doing the work about trying to clean up the street, make it more presentable, make it a better destination for people to go to, of huge significance to us. I will share also that we've worked to really change the narrative as well and around the way the city talks about business. So some of the business boards in Bristol were historically just white men, to be perfectly frank. Right? And our point was that we're a global city. We want to trade around the world. So there were business opportunities. A friend of mine is from Nigeria. She said, if you want to do business in Nigeria, you've got to have a Nigerian with you, or you're going to get eaten alive. Right? I said, well, we've got loads of Nigerians in Bristol. We want to do business in Nigeria. We want to do business in West Africa, East Africa, in Asia. we've got people from those communities. They've got family connections, business connections, political connections. And we need to begin to recognise the diversity of our population as an economic asset, not just as a political, social liability, as sometimes has historically been seen. And that language has started to change in those business forums. And certainly I've been making that case with government too. I was on a call with DIT recently, a ministerial level. And I said, you've got to think about international trade through cities. I have global populations in Bristol. If you work with those global populations, they can make the connections to fast-growing economic markets around the world. Will they listen? I don't know, but we're continuing to make the case.
waxaad u ololeynaysaa sidii aad marka loo soo noqon lahayd bulshadan aan ka hadlaynaa maxaad leedahay way kugu dooran karaan oo waad oran kartaa waxaasaan u qabtay
because I don't want to be so presumptuous, but what I will say is I think we focused on the right things. You know, I grew up in the city, quite an unhappy child, if I dare say. You know, we struggled to pay bills, sometimes didn't eat as much as we might have liked. You know, I didn't enjoy school much. And I come out of that childhood with some prospects and wanting to make sure that people didn't have to face those same challenges I faced growing up. As in, since coming in, we've tried to take on the issues that matter, building homes for people, making sure children aren't hungry, tackling education inequalities, getting access to the market through our work experience programs, bringing through our transport solutions in the city. But what we've done is that we've not just looked at what goes on inside our city boundaries. We've tried to be a positive force on a global stage. So I sit on the Mayor's Migration Council, which is shaping global policy on migration. We shaped the Global Compact on Migration and on Refugees that was held that went through the United Nations, and promoting the Sustainable Development Goals, which has massive implications particularly for Global South leaders. And in fact, when I was in Marrakesh a few years ago, the Mayor of Tangiers and the Mayor of Freetown both said, when you're talking about migration, you have to look at what's going on in our countries, because we don't want to lose those young people in the first instance. So we have to look at the conditions you're creating in the global south as well. So I think we've had a very ambitious approach to the city, but it's an ambition that's been underpinned by compassion and concern and making sure that people aren't left behind. I'm not perfect, no one is. But I think we have done some really good things, and we've tried to work in partnership with people to make that real. So that's the offer really, it's the ongoing relationship.
maxaa ku qabsoomay intii aad joogtay maxaase ka qabiya oo aad leedahay dadkeena daawanaya waxyaabahaas aan waxba ka qaban oo aan wax ka qaban doonaa?
Well, the two very much cross over. I think the signature is house building, affordable house building. We have, again, look at COVID. It's one of the big things that's exposed is inequality in housing, overcrowded housing, people without access to green spaces, you know, in flats, and we have those in Bristol, people living in tower blocks, a legacy of you know, decades of poor city planning. So we have to accelerate house building and accelerate the delivery of affordable homes. So we'll be looking to continue delivering at 2,000 a year, at least 1,000 of those affordable. Actually, in my term, we've delivered 9,000 homes. You know, we've really made a change in house building in the city. So that's of huge significance. And the other big city issue is transport. Because we know that, again, people can be physically locked out of economic opportunity because they're not connected. The city can be fractured because of poor public transport. So bringing forward the increase in our bus network and the mass transit system we're looking at that includes an underground is really important as we try to decarbonise our economic recovery. There are all sorts of other themes around that are not specific policies, but certainly, you know, around tackling inequality, education inequality, more diversity in the criminal justice system, recruiting magistrates, more diversity amongst our teaching staff as well. And I really want to support the police to recruit more diverse people as well from wide range backgrounds to become police officers, because we know criminal justice system is massively significant. And then obviously the ongoing challenge of mental health, which again is going to be compounded by the consequences of COVID. But in terms of the big things you can see, house building and transport have to really underpin the city's future.
dadka Soomaalida ah ayna daawanaya fahmaya luqadan aan ku hadlayo maxay tahay ugu dambeyntii fariinta aad gaarsiinaysaa?
Yeah, there is actually, and it's that even as mayor, I often say to people, it's not just about me. Right from the beginning, we have said this is about a partnership. As the mayor, part of my job is clearly to get things done, but it's also to create the conditions in which people can actually get things done. So they've got some space to innovate, to become entrepreneurs. They can talk to me about connections they can make. And again, that's the offer really. I want to create a city in which people can actually generate their own futures, and communities can build their own futures, because we've made space for that and we've made resource available to support that. And I'd love to continue in that vein with those relationships.
mudane mayor Marvin Rees mayorka magaalada Bristol aad baad ugu mahadsan tahay inaad waqtigaaga aad u ciriiriya aad noogu timaado xarunta aan ku leenahay magaalada tan Bristol ee Sab TV waan kaaga mahad celinaa waqtigaaga waxaan ku rajaynaynaa guul.
No, thank you very much. Great to be on Sab TV.
aad buu mahadsan yahay kaasi wuxuu ahaa mayorka magaalada Bristol oo aan ku wareysanay historiyahan ku leenahay magaalada Bristol. barnaamijka waxaa la socodsiinayay anigoo Maxamed Triga dhanka farsamadu waa Cismaan tan iyo saraaga maqalkeena dambe waxaan idinkaga tegayaa. Assalaamu calaykum waraxmatullaahi wabarakaatuh.